Hi there, it's Frank Foley again with another little literary takeaway for you. This one from The Battler by Ernest Hemingway. It's a short story published in his collection In Our Time in 1925. Love this story. Got a little takeaway from it later, but I'll just outline it a little bit. So it's a Nick Adams story. Nick Adams is in his late teens. Hemingway wrote a number of stories with the character of Nick Adams in from adolescence until kind of early adulthood. Nick is in his late teens here, and it's a story about kind of a young lad, inexperienced, naive to the ways of the world, and how is he going to learn how to be in the world? How's he going to learn to negotiate his way through the world? So it's kind of at the beginning, Nick is sucker punched. He gets onto a train, basically. He hitches a ride on a train and he gets sucker punched by the brakeman. Gets knocked off the train, and he's feeling pretty aggrieved. It's at night, so it's pretty dark. Has to walk to the next town, and on the way he comes across a fire, and he kind of has a little look, and there's a hunched up figure sitting there by the fire, and he talks to this guy, and it turns out this guy's a boxer. Anyway, this character's had a life in boxing and has been beaten up, but they seem to be kind of getting on okay. And I'm not going to kind of spoil the story for you because you really should read it. It's a great little story. Eventually another character comes along that is with this guy who's called Ad Francis. But really you're looking at a young man who doesn't really understand the nuances of the world in terms of the complications and the difficulties you can get into with threats of violence and confrontation and that kind of thing, and how Nick is gonna negotiate his way. Can he learn how to be someone that survives? Or they've got an example right there which is Ad Francis, and life has kind of beaten him to the point where he doesn't really know what he's doing anymore. So it's a lovely story, but the little takeaway that I've got from it, I'm going to leave you with, and I really recommend you read it. But the takeaway is there's this lovely moment. So with Hemingway, there's always this kind of threat of violence underneath, which he does so well, which I've always loved that. There's a kind of tension there. And while Ad Francis, the boxer, and Nick are on their own by the fire in the middle of nowhere, they've had this conversation. It seems to be pretty friendly, and then they get Ad says something about how his pulse is very slow. My pulse has always been very slow. He's this rough bloke. He's this rough boxer that's got a misshapen face and rock hard, little guy. And my pulse has always been really slow, he says. And Nick's like, okay, and he's like, yeah, it's always 40. You should test it now. Let's test it. And he grabs Nick's hand and holds it to his wrist and says, like, count. And he says, I'll count to 60 and you count my pulse. And Nick's like, okay. And time passes and Ad says, right, 60. What's my pulse? And Nick says 40. And it's a lovely little touch. It's kind of funny, but it also gives us a sense that Nick, maybe Nick is learning the ways of the world. Nick, it probably wouldn't be a good thing for him to say, oh no, it was 65. He says 40. Ad Francis is content with that. Yeah, told you, kind of thing. And for the time being, at least, Nick's not in any danger. He hasn't created any confrontation. So, just from that first. We don't see that because the story happens when Nick's already been punched. But, he's been sucker punched. He's been naive. He's fallen for the trick, got punched. But here, maybe he's learned something. Maybe just a slither of a sense of like knowing what to say and when to say it. And I think that's kind of what the stories are all about. How you're going to negotiate your way through life as a younger person, learning about how hard life can be sometimes. As the story goes on from that point, there's an interesting little turn. So, I won't spoil that for you. But yeah, why I love The Battler by Ernest Hemingway. Really recommend you should read it. If I can find a public domain copy, I'll link it underneath. But The Battler by Ernest Hemingway. Thanks a lot. Cheers.